Today we'll be talking about Crybaby by Melanie Martinez, which was actually one of the albums I was looking forward to covering most when I started doing the series. But now I'm starting to realize that there is a lot of stuff that I was either looking over or completely missing out on. So let's see how good it still is 10 years later. You're watching Tumblr Retrospective on The Current. Melanie Martinez is a newly 30-year-old singer from Astoria, Queens. She actually got her start on The Voice, and it seems that if you actually want to have a career in music, the thing that you shouldn't do is win The Voice. So she was one of those people, and she got signed and subsequently released Crybaby as her debut album. Melanie Martinez is quite the controversial figure, and I think this highlights the tendency that the Tumblr platform tends to have with ignoring certain aspects of music that was popular on the site. The aesthetic that she has adopted was always quite questionable. The vintage aspect of it was particularly popular on Tumblr. However, it has created more victims than just her refusal to conform to consent allegations. It has led a lot of her fans down the wrong paths on Tumblr. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. From the Carol News, Martinez created a recognizable brand through her first two albums. Both Crybaby and K-12 used adolescent themes to juxtapose dark ideas in her music like sexual assault, domestic violence, and drug abuse. This combined with her juvenile costumes and babyish voice created an iconic visage of Martinez, and she became an artist who was known for exposing society's wrongs through meek and childlike eyes. So Martinez is famous for her split dye hair, split into one darker color and one lighter color. Sometimes it's pink, sometimes it's bleached. And she had actually mentioned that that was inspired by Cruella de Vil. In one of the interviews that I read while doing research for this video, Martinez just casually drops that she doesn't read any books. Coming to find out what I found out doing research for this video, that was kind of wild to read. And it's also a bit of a mad claim to make when you have one of your songs on your album referencing Alice in Wonderland. She said that she read books when she was little, but around the time that Crybaby was released, she didn't read much at all. I think she could have benefited from reading Lolita. It's kind of like Martinez was just looking for an aesthetic to adopt and go through all of the aesthetics that were popular on Tumblr and just picking the one that was used the least, while simultaneously not really considering that that was perhaps for a good reason. And if I look at her blog that she made in 2014, I do see the vision, but it's just really done in poor taste. Kind of just seems like she wanted to be an edgelord. Besides this, she was just playing bingo with every sensitive topic on Tumblr and just shooting her little shots where she wanted to write a song about it. Please don't let them look through the curtains. Let's talk about the album artwork. On the cover, we see a mixed media image of Martinez on a cloud with some paper cutouts of teardrops or raindrops. It's also featured her iconic split dye hair. We see some balloons in the back spelling out the album title, which is actually a reference to one of the title tracks, Pity Party. The only interpretation I could find was a clunky fan interpretation, and it basically just comes down to it was an interpretation of Pity Party. The colors represent childlike innocence and purity. There was some alternative artwork floating around the internet, and I found this image on her Tumblr blog where someone was asking if there was any other album art that she was considering. There was no other album art. I've had the album art in my head for a long time and always stuck with it. Besides this, there was never really any official interpretation given for this album cover. I do think it represents the album pretty well. However, it just tends to gloss over some of the themes on the album, and from the album cover, you can't really tell what you're getting into, I would say. Kids are still depressed when you dress them up. Martinez has said in an interview with Hello Giggles, toy sounds were my biggest inspiration for the album. It's kind of where everything started. I love dressing in vintage pastel dresses and stuff. It goes with the music too. So like I said in the beginning of the video, there's a couple of sensitive topics that Martinez has written songs about. What's crazy about this is that she said very open and honestly in an interview, she had actually never had a traumatic childhood herself or dealt with any of the topics that she was talking about in her songs. Now, there's a lot of discourse online about whether you're allowed to write about things that you have not experienced. Obviously, that's murky waters that we're not really going to get into. However, I do think it is pretty interesting that she chose to write these songs about these topics that she pretty much has no relation to. The only relation that she had to it was that she said that she had a friend when she was younger that did have a difficult family life, and most of the album was based off of those kind of experiences that she had when she was little herself. I'm just going to get into like my personal opinion and criticism here. I do think she could have approached the subject matter on this album much better if she held the point of view which she has from the Dollhouse song. We could pretty much say the same things and tell the same story as long as we move the point of view. I saw someone else point out that the whole thing that makes it weird is that Martinez is centering herself as the character of Crybaby. And now the inspiration for the character of Crybaby was mainly she was really sensitive and emotional when she was younger, and she was often getting shamed for being overly emotional. And I do think that that sentiment of the album has its heart in the right place. We could have still held it the same if the character of Crybaby was just a character. Melanie Martinez was a doll observing everything from the dollhouse, and then the story is told from that point of view. I do agree that Martinez centering herself in all this stuff and basically trauma cosplaying a child is a bit strange. However, this has been discussed at length on the internet. I can show you many other videos that you can watch if you want to get into those topics. Today, we will just be talking about the album, the music, and the impact that it had on Tumblr. So yeah, in general, I would say that the types of people that Martinez has associated with, the aesthetics that she has adopted are just giving edgelord, like I said earlier. Especially some of the people that she associates with have also done and said really problematic things. It just kind of makes her look guilty by association to me. But in general, I think this album, when I look back on it, because I did not enjoy revisiting this album whatsoever, it also didn't help that I had a lot of the songs that I didn't like stuck in my head constantly, or the bits that I didn't like stuck in my head, playing in my head on loop constantly. Essentially, how I feel about the album sonically and how it sounds 10 years later is it's just basically Lana Del Rey with an 808. If you could just imagine, like, put yourself in today, right? You know how Billie Eilish is getting milked? Like, there's about 100,000 different sub-artists that sound exactly like Billie Eilish, like the way they sing, the way they write their songs, the way they produce the beats and stuff like that. It's very clear that Billie Eilish had a massive impact on what pop music sounds like today. But I feel like 10 years ago, we kind of had the same thing with Lana Del Rey, and this is definitely one of those sub-artists of Lana Del Rey. We're using orchestral samples with violins and string instruments, and then just kind of like chopping them up in a kind of hip-hop style almost, adding in some 808s, some claps, making it very poppy, and especially for the 2015 era. So yeah, in general, I would say the instrumentals are good, but it's definitely a product of the time. I can hear that it hasn't aged so gracefully and it doesn't sound timeless. The best aged instrumental is definitely Sippy Cup. My personal favorite on the album is Dollhouse, because the chorus has the crunchy bass line that just goes super well with the dark sentiment of the song. It's also one of the songs that's less creepy. So I do think I see myself revisiting that song every once in a while, but it was one of those songs that I had stuck in my head all the time. And I do think the toy sound samples get a little bit overdone, especially because this album is quite meaty and packed to the brim. It has quite a long runtime, like 45 minutes. But yeah, so 10 years later, I am definitely having a really, really hard time looking past some of these lyrics. Like, for example, if we talk about Tag You're It sounds like it's describing a child abduction fantasy. It's just weird. It was not like one of my favorite songs back in the day, but yeah. And then we have the very obvious worst song on this album, which is pacify her. It's just giving internalized misogyny. It's giving pick me. It's giving bad 2015 version of Misery Business. And personally, I also just hate vocal chops, like chopped up vocal samples. I just think it sounds so cheap and corny, and like they needed to fill the empty part of the song with something, so they just do vocal chops. I just think it's such a cop-out. And sonically, this album also reminds me a little bit of Electra Heart by Marine and the Diamonds, except Electra Heart is like way better executed in that like character that has silly mistakes that they make that they're not willing to own up to, whereas Crybaby generally feels a little bit more not as self-aware, and it just comes off a bit clunky and awkward sometimes, especially if we talk about songs like Mad Hatter. It's just trying really hard to be edgy and trying to blend those teenage adolescent themes with childhood. And it's just really blurring the lines between what's art and awesome and what's creepy and just kind of fucked up. So yeah, then we also have the fan favorite, Miss Potato Head. And I guess it's meant to be interpreted positively, but then again, it's kind of shaming women for the choices that they make. In the second half of the chorus, Martinez asks Mr. Potato Head, how did you afford the surgery? And that also makes it sound like a man is somehow responsible for making women do certain things, and also making it simultaneously sound with the would you still love her if her face melts off line. I'm paraphrasing, but that women are only worthy if they're being loved by a man. Just especially now in 2025 woke, it didn't land with me. I just generally feel like this song was not well executed, and though the message is supposed to be interpreted positively, like I said in the beginning, it's supposed to make you feel good about yourself and feel like, yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't need plastic surgery or whatever. You don't know why people are getting plastic surgery, and you're completely ignoring the fact that there are lots of people who are much happier with themselves after they got plastic surgery. There's definitely a discussion to be had about plastic surgery, I won't deny that, but I do think that this song is just kind of glossing over how complicated it can all get, and it's just done in a very distasteful manner. So besides that, kind of like the Marina album, it is a classic pop album where it just goes on for a little bit too long. The 4x4 beat structure is repeated for a long time, and then we just throw a chorus in for a second time after we have like a little vocal chop section, and sometimes it just generally feels like the album goes on much longer than it needs to, and it doesn't necessarily give anything interesting for the ear to work with and stuff like that. So yeah, besides this, like I said earlier, Melanie Martinez has more than a few victims, and even a few victims that she has not even met in real life, has never touched. So for example, I also saw some TikToks come by of ex-Martinez fans saying that because of Melanie Martinez, they got into communities online with these names. They were generally 12, 13 running these kinds of blogs on Tumblr. And you can't deny that that's just inappropriate. I don't personally really care where Martinez decides to buy her clothes off of Etsy or what kind of message she's trying to promote. I do understand that if there's consenting adults doing that, that's their choice. I don't really care about that. But the fact that you're dragging children into this, and there's this different part of an interview that I read with her where she said that she was really surprised that most of her audience is really young. So she knows, she has seen literal children at her show, and she just continues to do this and acts really aloof about it. So yeah, she has since dropped the aesthetic. So when she was releasing her Portals era, there was a very obvious moment in her death music video where there's a headstone that says RIP Crybaby, and it's just very obvious that she couldn't stand behind the aesthetic anymore with all the criticism that she has gotten, and she doesn't want to own up and take responsibility for anything that she has done, the victims that she has created, and she would rather move on and hide behind a mask, literally, and just make different music. And you know, she's an artist, she can do what she wants. I don't know her, but it's all not looking very good for Melanie Martinez. And yeah. Again, I was so excited to look back on this album because I just remember thinking it was so good and amazing and boundary pushing. Yeah, as soon as you start acting recklessly with minors, yeah, it's not cool, it's not funny, it's not interesting, it's not edgy, it's just dark. And nasty.
I feel it coming out my throat. Guess I better wash my...
Where is Melanie Martinez now? Well, she has just released an album a couple of years ago. There's also some controversy surrounding expensive tickets with the augmented reality photo op that was part of the ticket price. So fans were just initially disappointed, had never gotten some of the parts of their VIP package. So that's a thing. I've tried to look up what she's doing now. She's just a little bit off the grid. It was her birthday recently. That's the only thing that I could really find. She's not touring. She's not really recording anything new. She's not really doing anything. I think her reputation is just kind of down in the dumps right now, and she must be cooking up an evil master plan to see how she can come back from this, because it's not looking too good. Anyway, so that was my first overly critical video about my Tumblr retrospective. I don't really know what to say other than I feel really sorry for the people that were dragged into communities that they were way too young for. Like, that must have been like a really crazy and traumatizing experience. I do think, you know, we're still kind of adapting to the famous on the internet musician and what the responsibilities are that come with that. But I do think Melanie Martinez is not a good example. If we completely separate the art from the artist, I wouldn't say her music is bad, but it's just so like intertwined, because when you listen to the songs, you can't ignore the lyrics or the vocal inflections that she does, where she's literally trying to sound like a baby. At one point it just gets really uncomfortable and it's not edgy anymore, you know? Especially on Crybaby itself, there's samples of children crying, and that just really rubs me the wrong way. I'm not like, wow, yeah, let's sit down for a happy song, you know? Like, if I hear someone crying, I'm sensitive myself. I can't hear someone crying and not be upset with that myself. Or, for example, in one of the music videos, Crybaby is born, basically, and the character who plays the mother immediately says like, oh, she's a crybaby. I don't know, but that just like stabbed me in the heart. Like, that really hurt me. When a real crybaby listens to Crybaby. But yeah, that's just in general how I felt. Like, I'm a grown-ass adult now, and this like still rubs me the wrong way, which is crazy. But yeah, if we look back on it, I do not recommend this album. Like, generally, I wouldn't really say that often. I've definitely had a better experience revisiting some of the other albums. So yeah. Let me know what you think of this video, and if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. Enjoy your sunny day. Today is going to be almost 30 degrees. It is the 1st of May, and it's going to be wonderful weather, so I'm going to stop sweating in this chair, and I will see you next time on Tumblr Retrospective. Bye-bye!